Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Mess. So, taking a fun and exciting episode to guys today because we're taking another look at Jotego's OutRun and OutRun core for Analogue Pocket. And I know recently I've been doing a lot of Analogue Pocket videos. That's just because not a lot of stuff has been going on. And even though there are still a few glitches in the actual version of this game, it definitely is something that is now back on Analogue Pocket and workable for a lot more people. And that isn't just exciting because OutRun and OutRun are two of the best games of all time. It also has to do with the Capcom CPS3 core development on the Mr. FPGA side of things. Before we get too far involved though, do me a huge favor down below, hit like and subscribe and ring that notification bell, definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, got a Patreon link down below as well. But honestly, OutRun and OutRun are two of the best sprite scaling 2D games ever made by Sega or anyone else, and Jotego's been working on this core all the way back since like 2024, the first time I think I did a video on this. But for the longest time, this core had issues on Analogue Pocket. On some devices, there'd basically be completely missing sprites on either the sides of the screen or apparently even the car. Now, I never encountered that on my revision of the Analogue Pocket hardware, so it's one of those things I never actually got to see what it looked like in motion. But because Jotego's working on that Capcom CPS3 core, and part of the actual technology underlying that also works for the OutRun core, it's something that needed to be fixed up to better understand the behavior. And that is the reality of so many things, whether it's Analogue Pocket, Mr. FPGA, a Sega core involving OutRun, or a Capcom core involving fighting games. A lot of what is learned here always goes on to actually aid in the development of future cores. Now before you ask, I have absolutely no idea if a Capcom CPS3 core would fit on the Analogue Pocket. My guess definitely with that much reduced logic would be no, but it's one of those things, if all you get out of that development is a better working OutRun and OutRun, that's not the worst thing in the world to have happen, because again, this game is 10 out of 10 legendarily good. Leave me a comment down below and you tell me, last time you played on your Pocket, did you have issues or not? I really would be curious, because it seems like only some Analogue Pocket users had that issue, and there was a hardware revision to the RAM in some point in time with Analogue actually making the Pocket. And there's been more than one core out there that's had games function for some Analogue Pocket users but not for others, and a lot of times the core just needs to be patched up to make sure that you have the same behavior across both different versions of that RAM. And as far as the technical details on that, I think they maybe just switched to a different manufacturer or basically just laid it up slightly differently, which could affect a few edge cases, OutRun and OutRun apparently being one of them. So now the situation is, if you want to play these games, doesn't matter what Analogue Pocket you have hanging around, you should be totally fine. And as far as how this game is going to display its art and how it actually functions, again, is going to be relevant to that Capcom CPS3 core. And I know that can be a little bit confusing because you're thinking to yourself, how does a 2D sprite scaling arcade racing game have any sort of underpin technology that would help for something like a pure 2D system that just has fighting games on it like Capcom CPS3? Basically, Jotego has a framework, and a lot of the cores he develops kind of utilize some aspects of that framework. So there's something in OutRun and OutRun that is also going to be relevant for a Capcom CPS3 core, whether it's a frame buffer or otherwise. So kind of going back in and buttoning up these issues, better understanding them, is going to aid in the development of that CPS3 core when it comes time. That doesn't mean you're going to see it next week, next month, or even next year. I have absolutely no idea on the timeline of something like Capcom CPS3, but anytime I have a chance to talk about OutRun on the channel, whether it's FPGA or otherwise, I'm absolutely going to do that. Because here you see all of these sprites that basically look like you're actually moving in a 3D tunnel. Apparently in some builds of the core, those were completely missing, and that would definitely take a lot of fun out of the game and a lot of the visual splendor away. Because not only is OutRun technically a masterclass in 2D arcade racing, it was also just absolutely a showcase of what you could do with sprite scaling back in the day. And it's not to say that the core is 100% perfect. If you actually slow down, you can still see a glitch here or there, but it is getting so much better. And again, there's a lot of hardware going on here. Sega was basically pushing 2D as far as they could in this generation, and that definitely takes a long time to get 100% perfect in FPGA or even software emulation. But let's move over to OutRun and do a soundtrack sample, because the music, again, 10 out of 10 iconic, and anytime I can make you listen to it and get it stuck in your head like it is in mine, I will. So go ahead and listen. I'll be right back with a lot more. Just a 10 out of 10 iconic soundtrack and a 10 out of 10 iconic look here. Now, if you're wondering exactly what was fixed up, now I'm going to get into the technical details of the video for the people that stuck around after the soundtrack sample. Basically, OutRun uses a frame buffer, as does something like Golf and Grace, which just got on Mr. FPGA, as does the Capcom CPS3. And if you're not sure what a frame buffer is, it's basically just a way to store the next frame, or even sometimes double or triple frame buffer depending on the hardware, before it is displayed. So you need a frame buffer for Capcom CPS3. Something like OutRun requires a frame buffer as well, so fixing that up and getting it 100% working will go towards that Capcom CPS3 core. Now, don't think a frame buffer is just a universal thing. You can't just pick one frame buffer out of a core and go and completely drop it into another core. Everything can be done in different manners, even if it does achieve the same result. But if you just kind of want the TLDR on frame buffers, it is storing the next frame, at least one, that you're going to be seeing on the screen. Not every single piece of hardware out there has a frame buffer, so it's one of the realities that you need to make sure it works, or else you're not going to really see any of the frames on something like OutRun. So that can be tricky. It's basically just kind of grabbing that frame, getting it ready before you actually see it. And in practice, we're talking about single frames here, and on a 60 frame per second game, we're talking about 1/60th of a second. So you never even think about a frame buffer, because as far as playing the game is concerned, you never know it's there, and it doesn't matter to your gameplay whatsoever unless there's bugs or glitches in the frame buffer code. Then you're definitely going to notice, and I'm sure that was why maybe some of the sprites were missing. Maybe that frame buffer wasn't actually buffering everything it needed to fast enough, and it wasn't spitting out the entirety of the result. That's how you can end up with a situation where some sprites just aren't displaying, at least as far as my technical understanding of it is concerned. And again, I always stress, I am not a coder whatsoever. I am a filmmaker that does a lot of stuff with hardware modding and the overall reverse engineering of security on arcade boards, but nothing in regards to actually coding anything, FPGA or otherwise. I'm actually pretty bad at coding because I can't visualize the problem, so trying to type out a solution to it just never seems to work for me personally. But this is definitely a vast improvement, and it really does go to explain how intrinsically entwined all of FPGA development truly is. Fixing a bug in an issue on Analogue Pocket on a core that doesn't have that bug on Mr. FPGA is going to make something like Capcom CPS3 easier. And again, even if CPS3 will probably never make its way over to Analogue Pocket, it is still a fun result. But I'm kind of curious. Leave me a comment down below. Are you an Analogue Pocket only user? Do you have Mr. FPGA as well? Or do you have both? Because I know my Analogue Pocket audience is a little bit smaller. That's why I kind of wrapped this video up not only in an Analogue Pocket core review, for lack of a better term, but also under the guise of Capcom CPS3 development on the Mr. FPGA side of things. But outside of the few minor visual glitches that you would never even notice if you didn't slow the game down, this just seems to play like OutRun. It is as fun as OutRun, and honestly it sounds as good as an arcade board, and that is definitely a very cheap segue into the second soundtrack sample, because again, some of the best music Sega's ever made, and I'll be right back after this just to talk a bit more about the game. Absolutely amazing music, or maybe you heard nothing whatsoever, because weirdly enough, some of the OutRun music actually throws up a flag, and that is not because Sega is telling you you can't use it. A band actually sampled some of the music from OutRun and now claims ownership if you actually use it in a video, which is maybe one of the most shameful things you can see on YouTube. Bands that are just basically borrowing samples without permission and then telling everyone else, I own it, and if you want to use it, you have to pay me money to do so. Not relevant to FPGA development or OutRun in any way, shape, or form. It is always something that's absolutely insane to me, and something I wanted to shame in the video, because damn it, if you don't own something, don't pretend you do and say I now have to pay you if you want to hear OutRun music in a technical video. But outside of that one little tangent, OutRun on the Analogue Pocket is definitely improved, and that is going to be one step closer to something like Capcom CPS3 in the future. And honestly, maybe someday you'll see Analogue make a Pocket 2 with a much bigger FPGA that could actually run something like the Capcom CPS3. But considering, at least as of the recording of this video, we still don't have a ship date yet on Analogue 3D whatsoever, maybe it's best that Analogue doesn't jump in and try to make new hardware before they can ship the old hardware. But we're done. Hope you enjoyed the video. Go play OutRun, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.